Welcome to Dad Pod, a community for dads and men.
You gotta love them boys. I'm hanging with my boys. Just me and my boys.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dad Pod. Excited to bring this episode to you guys. We are honored to have our special guest, Dr. Hasan Merali, joining us. We originally spoke on, originally connected through LinkedIn, and decided it was a great topic for discussion. Today is going to be about toddlers and learning from toddlers, and so I'm excited to get into it, and excited to be here with my dad as well, and to be talking about toddlers. And so, first, Dr. Merali, I want to ask you a little bit about an introduction to yourself and you know, where you're coming from and what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Clay and Troy. It's great to be here. So I'm a pediatric ER physician. I work at McMaster University in Canada, and I also am an associate professor and researcher, mostly in global health. And over the years working with kids, I have realized that toddlers and preschoolers are amazing people. And so I wrote a whole book about them called Sleep Well, Take Risks, Squish the Peas, Secrets from the Science of Toddlers for a Happier, More Successful Way of Life. And it really lays out, what we can learn from them, because there's a lot of what we need to teach them out there. And I wanted to really flip that script and talk about how wonderful they are and how we can improve our lives learning from them.
I love that. I love that perspective, because a lot of times, if you're tuning in and you haven't had kids, or you're tuning in and you have kids, you have these ups and down moments where you wonder why you had kids sometimes. You're like, man, this is kind of crazy. And then but every single time, though, at least for me, it's always been a wonderful blessing and something I would never look back on. And I love what you're highlighting here. The fact that we can learn so many things from them, and we kind of get away from these habits because, we go into school and we get hammered with, things that we have to leave behind, or, things that whether actually physically spoken or just unspoken rules, and just things that we kind of just follow. Mm-hmm. And so I'm excited to get into that. And what a great background you have there, what great expertise. And so, my first question I wanted to ask you is what inspired you to write about toddlers? I know you're an ER doc for toddlers, but why kind of that side of learning about the more kind of the psychological aspect of it?
Yeah, so I've been in pediatrics now for 14 years. That's when I started my residency, and taking care of the whole age spectrum in pediatrics, and all kids are wonderful. But through my experiences taking care of the little ones, especially the toddlers and preschoolers, kind of that magical age between 1 and 5, I've just been continually impressed with them. I take care of a lot of them who have fractures and cuts because they're taking risks and jumping off couches. They're always trying to make me laugh, and I have so much fun just interacting with them. And really, their kindness just has shone through so many different times in the ER when they're sick and not at their best, but they still remain kind. And so as I was thinking about them, and as a researcher, I was kind of going through the data on why they act the way they do and why they're so wonderful, I kind of looked at, what if we were to do that? What does the adult literature say? And I found that there's so many different things that toddlers do that map perfectly onto the adult wellness data. And so I really wanted to get this message out there, because truly, if we were to act more like toddlers, or I say be more toddler, then our lives would be better. And I wanted to help people understand that, whether they're parents or not, that we can really learn from children.
So I got a question for you. So how do I transition that? Because it's been a while since I've been so I can remember some of it, but how do I harness that kindness or that forgiveness and the things that you point out in that book? How do I put that into my life? What's some recommendations that you may have there?
Yeah, so for people who aren't lucky enough to have toddlers directly in their life, Hopefully, some of you may be grandparents, and that can be a very special time. And I think there's a lot of even better, stronger data of putting elderly people and toddlers together. But what you can do practically, we can get into some of the specifics, is really take some of the things that they're doing and try to do those things more or more like them. And so, I think the fundamental basis of wellness, I'll give you just one example, is sleep. And so if you look at a toddler's bedtime routine, it's actually incredible. And if we as adults were just to follow a toddler's bedtime routine, our sleep would improve. And as soon as you improve your sleep, your mood improves, everything can improve. And so I'll just go through that as one very practical thing for your listeners and viewers. So the toddler bedtime routine, if you don't remember, it's fairly straightforward. 1 hour before bed, you take a warm bath, and we can translate that into warm shower. That's totally fine. That actually cools your core and helps you sleep better. So you're doing that an hour before your bedtime. None of this involves any screens. That's the hardest part, is putting that cell phone, TV, everything, tablet away. Next thing is a hygiene activity. Little kids, it's obviously brushing their teeth. We all do that too. And little kids like to have a little lotion massage. And if you wanted to do that, that's fine. But any hygiene related activity. And then you'll probably remember this. Every little kid ends their night with a book. That's all they want to do, is read, read, read. And so we did the same thing before bed. Not only does it relax us and help us sleep better, but also helps us retain what we just read better because we read it just before we slept. So that's just one way we can take, what toddlers do and implement it in our own lives and really improve the way we sleep.
I love that. Thanks to my wife being as wise and as amazing as she is, we have a bedtime routine that we stick to every single day.
Great.
And our kids have never had problems sleeping through the night, ever. They've slept so well, and we have been so blessed. And I want to say that it's because, oh, I'm so cool, we're so great, or whatever, but it's really not. It's just the fact that we stick to the routine, and we try to stay pretty religious with it, being so direct, because it has made the biggest impact on my wife and our lives, because
Yes.
they know. In fact, I'll tell this story about my 1-year-old. He would be so mad before bedtime, right? Because he's so tired, he wants to get to bed. As soon as he sees us picking him up and going up the stairs, because he knows that we're starting his lotion and getting his pajamas on, he gets so happy and so playful. He just instantly changes his mood. And so the fact that you point that out, it's so important that we have a routine. And the part that I'm going to start implementing is my own bedtime routine and being more religious with it, because I don't, and I make that mistake. And I like how you say put your phone in its own bed outside of the room, and I'm going to start trying that, because I haven't done that, and I'm going to start trying that. So
That's
I
great. I
appreciate
think
that tip.
it's one of the hardest things to do. And, companies that make social media and cell phones make it incredibly difficult, but it's so, so important. And I just wanted to comment on what you said. Like, it just makes such a big difference once you have this routine and everybody's sleeping well. And it is a very simple thing to do. There's an entire industry on sleep and helping kids especially get to sleep. And so many complaints come to doctors and other providers, and a lot of money is spent on sleep consultants and a lot of other material. But it really is not that difficult in a lot of ways once you get your routine, and it doesn't have to be expensive. Definitely not.
Oh yeah, I mean, just being more disciplined, right, and making the right choices. It makes it a lot easier. But I'll reference something really quick for the other dads out there. I know I'm referencing Joe Rogan's podcast because I saw it, but he had someone that was on that was speaking specifically about men, their testosterone and sleep. If you get about 5 to 6 hours of sleep consistently, men can expect to have the same level of testosterone as someone who's 10 years their senior. And I'd have to cite I can't cite the specific study that's done, but they had mentioned it, and it got me thinking like I need to get better about that. So,
Yeah, no, there's so much good data. I'm glad you mentioned that one. And for me, what really stands out is the data on dementia. Like the less sleep we get and the longer chronically we're sleep deprived, the higher our risk is. And it's really important for that to protect our long-term selves, cognitively especially.
yeah, absolutely. And I I need to start being more proactive about it rather than reactive. And I would say probably a lot of our audience does too. Is we can all get better, but that one's for sure something that we just kind of let slip. And
Hmm.
oh, we'll just catch up later. Oh yeah,
Yep.
sure. That's not how that works.
Yeah,
Well,
I know it's funny. We like let go of all these things or are disciplined about all these things, and sleep is the one thing that we let go of. And it's such, yeah, if not the most important thing, top three.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you pointed that out specifically for, dads who have young kids, especially for myself. Since they've been sleeping so well from like month 3, we've been really blessed that way. But I know a lot of dads don't get that, and so I don't know if you have. I know this is kind of out of the blue, but it got me thinking. Well, what about those that would say, well, I have a baby, they don't sleep through the night, and so I'm already done for anyway.
Yeah. And I want to give dads of newborns and of infants grace. It takes a while. It is a normal process, for them to have to wake and feed, and so give yourself some time until you're getting through sleeping through the night. And yeah, certainly when they're older, that's the time when you can really introduce the sleep routine. And yes, brand new dads, are going to be sleep deprived, and that's unfortunately part of it. But it is a temporary thing. But just know that it's temporary.
Yeah, and come up with a plan to get back to being disciplined because I know I let my exercise slip
Hmm.
when our third was born and I had my routine and then it kind of kicked me out and I wasn't disciplined. So anyway, for those that are feeling like it, it's easier to come up with a plan and stick to it and try to get disciplined there. But don't write it off as something that will never happen again because then it really won't if you let that get there.
Exactly. And then there's a lot of things, when they're older, you guys can do together, especially when it comes to the exercise and going to the park and things like that. It's just, it's hard with an infant. There are other things you can do, but yeah, give yourself a break if, the sleep is slipping off or the exercise is slipping off. Same things happen to me.
Perfect. I'm glad we talked about that basics, that first chapter, because that one, I loved how you introduced the book that way. And yeah, so the next part that I really wanted to get to was so why pick out? I know you pick out certain topics, right? So
Hmm.
you picked out the basics, which covers how they eat, how they sleep, right? The basics of their daily cycle. But then you pick out things like kindness and laughter and reading and play. Why pick those out specifically versus the myriad of other things that I'm sure that you could pick on?
Yeah, you're right. There are so many things. Part of it is practical to get it all into one book in a readable format, and then some of it was actually some self-discovery. So, for example, I've heard or people think that little kids don't see race, and so I was like excited. I'm like, oh, as I was like planning this book, I was gonna write a chapter on that, and I got into the data, and actually, it's there, and they certainly don't see it like we do, but it's not as relevant as I thought it would be, and the data is just not there to support they don't see any race, and I decided to not use that. So some of it was getting into the data and looking at everything I write about in these 10 chapters is has 20 years of data science behind it about how toddlers are. And then also what I really want to do with this book is make it very practical for adults. This book offers no parenting advice, and I give that disclaimer to people. It's really about how do you as an adult make your life better. And so I wanted to match those things that really, if we do better with and kind of map into our adult lives, can really improve our own lives. And so that's where I kind of got to those to that list. But you're right. There's a lot of other things that they do quite wonderfully.
I really
Yeah,
liked the chapter summaries that you just alluded to. So at the very end, you can say, okay, here's some practical things that you can do to make this applicable. I thought that was really well done and thought through.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, they're my toddler teachings. So yeah, it's nice to have those and in an easy format for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna find myself going back to those as well. In fact, I have to ask if you were inspired by because I'm inspired every day by the book Atomic Habits.
Yes.
And if you've read it, it kind of reminds me your book was very reminiscent, which is why I liked it so much. Is because of the end of chapter, like, hey, here's some things that you can take away. Here's the action items, and we make it. If you want the details of the case studies, go into the chapter, and yeah. And so I'm curious if you'd read it before or were inspired by that at all.
I absolutely have, and I'm very flattered for you to compare it to such an amazing book. It is incredible, and for me, one of my favorite nonfiction authors is Adam Grant, and he kind of does the same thing. And so I
Yep.
saw a few different nonfiction authors do that, and it was so helpful for me after having read that much material, especially with the research, to have it distilled down and something to go back to, like you say. And so yeah, so a few different authors inspired me to do that, and I think it turned out really well.
Yeah, Think Again is another great one too, which I know
Hmm.
you probably read that
Hmm.
one's. He does mention the toddlers, the debate between the child and the he talks specifically about that. That's cool. Um, yeah, so I mean, you talk about those the kindness and laughter and reading and playing. Well, there's one more thing I wanted to touch on there is, um, for other dads that are interacting with their toddlers, and the reason why I think this is so pertinent for us is if we can keep these things top of mind, it will help our interactions with our kids as well. And something I try to keep more top of mind for myself when I'm interacting with each one of my kids is trying to empathize and get right back in their shoes on how they would feel when they're wanting to play with me.
Yep.
And getting down to my son and I will play action figures. And the more that I can laugh and get really creative with almost building my own little movie set, right?
Yep.
And having my own interactions, he comes back to it the next day, and we continue almost from that same story. And so now that I've read your book, it stays more top of mind for me,
Yeah.
and so I think about that all the time.
That was just really beautiful what you said, and you mentioned two really important things, laughter and creativity. And so it's amazing just you interacting with your child, how you've noticed those things come out of you. And that's really what I want dads and people who have young children around them to, I think feel thankful for. Like, this person is bringing that out of me. And the laughter piece is just something that hits home for me so much. I have a 4-year old. And, if I take all the laughter in my adult lifetime, not when I was a kid, but my adult lifetime, it's, I would say, less than the amount I've laughed from these last 3 years from age 1 to 4 with her. It's just constant where she's trying to make jokes, wants me to laugh, feels so much joy when I'm laughing, and I can do, be silly and be free in that way and make her laugh too. And it's just this wonderful interaction. And I just feel so lucky that I have that little person to have that much laughter with. And I hope dads can really appreciate that, because little kids are just so funny and want to make you laugh. And for me, having a little girl who thinks I'm the funniest person she knows, and me who I think she's the funniest person I've ever met, is just fantastic. We're just laughing and having fun all the time, and that's so good for both of us. And one of the things that gets missed with just laughter and having fun, of what we need to do more, is little kids are doing it because they're also just building relationships. Yes, they're like playful and fun, but it is an amazing way for adult to adult conversations, to make the other person laugh, and something we don't do enough. It really builds that connection with another person to laugh with them, like you and I just had. So
Yeah.
it's a great takeaway that we should continue in the rest of our lives when we're not with our little kids too.
Yeah, there's studies
Absolutely.
that show that laughter helps your life longevity as well, right? So the more
Yes.
so I've read on those kinds of things, and I marvel at how easily children laugh. Right? They laugh at
Hmm.
anything. It doesn't.
Anything.
They just, and it's like, what's so funny? Why are you laughing?
Yeah.
But you can't help but laugh. I mean,
Yeah.
even if you watch videos of the children laughing for no reason, it makes you laugh just because you're laughing along with them. So it's great medicine.
Yeah, I don't know if you know much of like any case studies that come to mind because I know you're very well read. But I've always wondered how is it so contagious to laugh when other people are laughing. You just want to laugh and join in, and it's from this your deep sense of tribalness, right? And you want to join in
Yes.
and fit in, but you know, I can think of a video right now of my oldest who was one when he was one. He was knocking over a water bottle and he was belly laughing so hard, and I was just laughing so hard about that because he
Yeah.
thinks it's funny. And
Yeah.
anyway, our ability to empathize and be able to put each other in their shoes and is so huge. And and laughing along with them, that judgment free zone and the
Yes. Good
sincere
point.
interactions are so huge, and you can truly be yourself. It's truly such a freeing experience.
Yeah,
But
definitely. And something you had pointed to too, it's evolutionary as well, like this laughter and tribalism, like we want to build those relationships. And that's another reason why they're so good at teamwork. And I have a whole chapter on teamwork, which I think it's actually my favorite one because when I went through it, I was just amazed at how seriously they take joint tasks and joint commitments. Like they really don't even care about the outcome. Their focus is I want to work with this person. And if this person has agreed to work with me, then we're going to make sure that we do our best to get this done. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to try to help them. I'm not going to blame them if things go wrong. If we get a big reward, we're going to share it. If I have actually more reward than the other person who worked with me, I'm going to share that. And that's just something incredible about them as well. And I think something we can learn from them.
Yeah, I loved that chapter as well because I was saying, okay, how can I make this applicable in the workspace? Because I have a rather large team and
Hmm.
lots of projects, and I liked your part on the engagement piece. Like the children were like, if this person's not engaging, they worked really hard to help them engage, right? The other
Yeah,
child,
really
and so
hard. Yeah.
really hard, the extra mile, and so I was fascinated by those studies and whatnot there, and how I can make that applicable in the workspace. It was
Yeah,
great.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah,
And it's interesting that, when we think about what makes a good team and for outcomes, because that's something we need to worry about as adults, it's really that teamwork and that team interaction that makes the best teams and gets the best outcomes. So that's really what we need to be focusing on.
for sure.
yeah, it's always about the chemistry of that team, and it makes it so much easier when someone's willing to be vulnerable and get the
Yep.
other person involved. And it's so hard when you're an adult because that's one of those things that you start shy away from, right?
Yes.
You realize that you don't need to be as tribal as you need to, or
Hmm.
as you think you might, right? You can get by doing it yourself, or you can just shoulder the burden and not bring up either the hard conversations or asking the other person to get involved because that's hard to do. Go sit with the person that's alone, right?
Yep.
I mean, taking multiple kind of examples here, but the that is such a good learning experience from toddlers is they don't think about that. They just engage the person and
Yeah.
and I mean, I can tell you how many walks I've been on with my 4-year-old, I guess he was 3 at the time, but he would talk to everybody, everyone on the side of
Yes.
the road, saying hi,
It's
asking them what
amazing.
they're doing, what's
Yep.
going on, and they doesn't think about it. And we need to go back to not overthinking that, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's such an important point you had, and you use the word shy, and we get shy about these things, like just waving at everybody and smiling at them. That's one thing, and the other thing I was just thinking about, which I think is so important, is asking questions. Like we do
Yeah,
get question shy when we get older, and again, it's useful for us directly because we get the information more easily if we just ask the question that we're shy about asking.
for
But
sure.
also, it's just another relationship building tool, and this small talk that we're doing sometimes when we meet new people or we're at work is actually really useful, and asking follow-up questions about someone else's life is another relationship building tool, and that's kind of what little kids are focusing on because that's really what they want to do is have better relationships. And so they ask a lot of questions, and they also just don't have that filter, and they just do what they think
Yeah,
is best and have this amazing curiosity. So all those things just make them ask that many questions. So it's incredible.
Yeah, they're not
100%. And
afraid to make themselves vulnerable or to make a mistake, right? Mistakes don't
Hmm.
even
Not at
resonate.
all. Not at all. Exactly. Good point.
Great culture in the workspace where we're going to make mistakes, or and people are afraid to ask questions. Maybe it can look silly, or they don't know what they're talking about, or whatever. And so I
Yep.
want to create the culture of that more relaxed atmosphere, so that those those better ideas and concepts will come out and come forward and problem resolve because of that culture. So I love that aspect of that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Exactly. Yeah, but just creating a much better culture is what they're able to do.
Yeah, and I was going to say, being in sales myself, the having read plenty of literature, the best salespeople, and this is easily the most written about topic, is those who are curious
Uh
and
huh.
who can ask the most questions.
Interesting. Yeah, there you go.
And because I mean, one very famous salesman and author is Jeb Blunt, and he talks about that specifically. He says a question you can ask is always more important than anything you can say,
Huh.
and it's it's so true. And toddlers are such, I want to say they're good salesmen, but they ask for what they want,
Yep.
and they don't really have that fear, and so
Yeah, and they
it's
don't take no
truly
for
a
an answer.
That's right. They're good
exactly.
people.
And I know from firsthand experience. And so I love that concept, and the fact that we're talking about that, because they, the more that you can engage with other people and be curious about them and ask questions, even just the first thing that they can say as they start their own small talk and they meet somebody, what's your name?
Yeah.
It's as easy as that. Hi,
Yep.
what's your name?
Yep.
My
Do you want
name
to
is
play?
what is so and so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so easy to say that, and
Hmm.
that's something we could totally easily learn from toddlers.
Yeah.
But I love that we're talking about that. So the next, as we're kind of winding down, the last thing I wanted to touch on was the risk taking and the confidence aspect. That was one of
Yes.
my favorite points, because I know as a dad,
Yeah.
we want to. There's kind of two facets to that. We want to teach them to be able to take reasonable risks,
Yes.
calculated risks, and to be able to have confidence. And
Hmm.
uh, I know and on the other side of that, we also need to get better at risk taking as dads. At least for me, I need to get better at letting them take risks and letting myself take risks.
Yeah.
Whether I'm going to be investing in the stock market or doing other things,
Yeah.
and those are aspects that we can learn. So can you speak to that both on both of those fronts, if you have any tips for us on that front?
Yeah, so incredible little people about taking risks. And, big picture, we see this growth that occurs in this early childhood stage of 1 to 5, where they're learning so much and getting so much information and growing, not physically, but just as people and cognitively. And the way they're doing that, and they know this, is by taking those risks. They never play it safe in sometimes the way we want them to. And they're always doing things that sometimes lead to injuries or lead to mistakes, but it's just a very, very minor setback for them. Not like for us, where we're like kind of afraid, and we actually do get much more risk averse when we're older. But, I see this in my practice all the time. Like if I have a shift that I'm not reducing a fracture or fixing a laceration on a little one, then that shift doesn't exist. And if that ever happened, I would be very worried that they're not being themselves. And so that's really wonderful to see. From the dad perspective, I just want to be clear, as a pediatric ER doctor and road safety researcher, we're not talking about car seats and swimming pools. Those are really, really important to make as safe as possible. But I think on the playground, we've gone a little bit too far, where we're trying to make this as safe as possible so kids don't like fall down and get hurt. And it's I think a little bit extreme, where we need to just let them be. We're watching them. We're making sure nothing crazy is happening, but they need to be able to do some climbing and fall down, and that's normal, and maybe hurt themselves in terms of getting a fracture. All fixable problems. And then on the adult side, it's really fascinating, talking about the workplace, is that when we take those risks, there's actually far less downside than in any other part of our lives. Like people who take risks at work are actually seen as leaders. And when those things don't go as planned, they're not seen as failures. They're seen as someone trying to grow the project, grow the company. And so we really, I think, can take a page out of their handbook and start doing those things more and realizing there's less downsides than we think. And the adult data for workplace risks is quite strong. And we're not going to have the downsides that we might think we will.
I appreciate that comment because I think we as adults create the mindset that risk is going to produce this unknown, and we create that bad vibe, so we don't
Yep.
even. So we think it's going to be worse than it actually is going to be, and
Yes.
what that that idea or thought might be, and we don't want to put it out there because we feel that's going to be perceived a certain way. So we create this unknown that's larger than it needs to be in our own minds, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the upside is so big with these things, and the downside is so much smaller than we think that it's really worth, getting those ideas out there, trying those things, and, related to our questioning thing, it's not going to be as bad as we think it will be about holding ourselves back, about asking a specific question or trying a new idea.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, we create this narrative in our minds that's gone to the worst possible scenario of all the
Yes.
outcomes, and it's always blown way out of proportion. And I can think of I can think of a few examples right off the top of my head where I did that, and
Yeah.
it's like why did I think it was going to be that bad?
Yeah.
We kind of create that, but again, that comes down to that evolutionary aspect too, that we don't want to get kicked from the tribe, right?
Yes. Yes, that happens.
But the other thing to remember too that I try to think of too is like no one's really watching or caring or paying that much attention to what you're doing.
Exactly.
But I love that. I love the discussion so far and just that risk taking. And so I'll help. I'm going to take a page from that and make sure that I can, within reason, take a step back and let my child take some risks as well as, take some myself and at least some that are calculated. And so, Hassan, is there anything else that goes unsaid that you wanted to talk about here before we wrap up?
Well,
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
the
Go
time-
ahead.
yeah, before you give him the last word, Clay, hold his book up again because I told him before we got on the air, I said, you know what, I was pleasantly surprised at the read. It was really good. And so, I love the perspective. I love the help that I got from rethinking things. Just the way he put it together, I totally recommend it. Yeah.
I'll add to that recommendation. I know I've already said it earlier, but I'll repeat it again. Again, it reminds me of Atomic Habits, and for such a well-renowned book, that's the structure and the way that it was written was so well done. It's easy for me to categorize if I want to recall something and go back to that. So for those of you that want to read it and have some key takeaways, it's huge, and it's going to be something that I constantly think about and will be constantly talking about and recalling in the conversations that I have. So thanks, Dad, for plugging that one too.
For sure. And sorry to interrupt you on that.
No, I really appreciate that from both of you. It means a lot to someone who wrote their first book. So thank you both for saying that. And for anyone watching or listening who is not a reader but is an audiobook fan, it is available as an audiobook as well, wherever you get your audiobooks. So just wanted to say, because we're on this topic about how we think and how we get inside our own heads. And one of my biggest learnings from writing this book and watching these little people was self-talk. It is just incredible how much they talk to themselves out loud. It's super cute, but actually what they're doing with that talk, and they're kind of guiding themselves, they're encouraging themselves, they're doing a lot of things by talking to themselves, even when no one's around, that I think we can learn from. And there's a great book I'll recommend as well. I don't know if you guys have read it. It's called Chatter. It's by Ethan Kross. And it really goes through a lot of the data about how we can use that self-talk. And I talk about it a lot in my book in some practical ways about us doing self-talk. And don't worry, it doesn't have to be out loud like they do. It can be inside your head. But really the key is to talk to yourself in second or third person. So really using your name and talking to yourself can really help us decrease stress in stressful situations. And that's probably one of the most important ways it can help us. So if you haven't learned about that, check out my book, check out Chatter. Self-talk is an incredible lesson we can learn from little people.
I love that. In fact, it reminds me of uh, another podcast I heard from someone talking about, on the parent side, am I their inner voice, or sorry, am I their inner critic or their inner champion?
Mm,
Right? And that comes to this, what they say to themselves, and it comes out, right?
yep.
And it reflects on the things that I know that I say out loud about myself. I'll
Yes.
frequently tell myself, "Oh, that I'm so dumb. Why did I do that?" Or "I'm so dumb. Why did I?" Of
Yeah.
Especially
course, you can think that really quickly and then overcome it. Like, okay, you're just learning. But if I say that out loud, it's going to come across from what they say, and so it's
Hmm.
huge. And so I love the self-talk, and it's a kind of a good internal audit for us dads. Hey,
Yep.
watch what you say to yourself,
Yeah.
because it comes across to them, and that has real ramifications. And so I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, I know it's important. It's not easy being a dad for a lot of reasons, and we get down on ourselves, especially first time dads. And I think one of the ways, if you catch yourself doing it, it's hard to first think about that you're doing this, but if you do, one good tip is just talk to yourself like you're talking to your best friend, and then see how that changes, see how the language changes, see how much empathy you can give yourself, and how much of a break you can give yourself.
That's hard. I'm going to do that one, though. It's hard to empathize with myself, because I know how. I'm not going to say it because I would say it normally. It
Yeah, but it's
starts
your
here.
best friend, so you can still tell that person, but you're gonna tell them in a much nicer way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a great tip. I'm going to try to think of that more often, because it'll definitely come across, and I want my kids to be able to say good things to themselves too. So,
definitely, very important.
Dr. Merali, thank you so much for being on with us. I've learned a ton. I've read the book, and I could discuss these things all day, and keep learning more, because these things are so much fun to talk about. So, but we appreciate you. We appreciate having you on. If again, for those that didn't see the cover or have seen it, remember, it's Sleep Well, Take Risks, Squish the Peas. And again, it's available anywhere that you can get an audiobook, as well as a physical copy. So, gentlemen, thank you so much, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
You gotta